Welcome back, everybody, to video 3 for chapter 29, where we're going to be talking about later revolutions. These were smaller revolutions in comparison to the American and French Revolution. It's not that they were any less impactful for the people involved with them. It's just that they didn't result in quite the world-changing impact of the American and French Revolution. Now, the Enlightenment and the two revolutions, we learned, as we just said, they sent ripple effects throughout the world, but especially in Europe and Latin America. Revolutionary movements were inspired by these revolutionary ideals. And the first of these next generation revolutions was the Haitian Revolution. Now, the country of Haiti is the result of the only successful slave result in world history. And that's important to remember. It took place on the island of Hispaniola. Now, Spain controlled the eastern part, then known as Santo Domingo, and while France controlled the western half of Saint Domingue. Right, so this is what Hispaniola looked like before independence. This was part over here controlled by Spain, and this over here, the western part, controlled by France. Saint Domingue was rich in natural resources, especially sugar. Right? Sugar plantations in Saint Domingue were a big moneymaker for the French. The population in 1790 was about 40,000 whites, which obviously owned all the land and controlled everything. 30,000 what they called free people of color, the gens de couleur. They were mulattoes, some of them, maybe some slaves that were able to buy their freedom. You also had somewhere in the range of 500,000 black slaves. Now, most of the slaves were directly from Africa because, like in Brazil, sugar plantations were brutal conditions, and mortality rates were very, very high. So they were constantly needing to replenish supplies of slaves and ship in new ones from Africa. Many slaves did run away, though, and they formed those maroon societies that we talked about a couple chapters ago. Additionally, the larger revolutions, French and American revolutions, resulted in a conflict of interest in Saint Domingue. France, as we said, supported the American Revolution, so they sent several hundred gens de couleur to aid the colonists in the American Revolution. Now, these individuals returned back to Saint Domingue, and they, having participated in a major independence movement, and they said, all right, it's time for us to reform society here. Now, at the same time, the French Revolution inspired the white population in Saint Domingue to demand total independence. However, they completely opposed any demands for equality among the free blacks. In 1791, civil war broke out between the free blacks and the whites. This escalated big time a few months later when a massive slave revolt started. At this point, all three factions started fighting one another. Now, many slaves, as I said, were directly from Africa, and they were experienced warriors from Africa, having been involved in major military campaigns there. And they were also aided by the island's maroon populations. French troops arrived in 1792 to put down the rebellion, and the British and the Spanish actually tried to get involved because they hoped to take advantage of the instability on the island to take it over. The rebellion survived, though, largely due to the leadership of Toussaint Louverture. Toussaint Louverture, often referred to as the George Washington of Haiti. He was born to slave parents but gained his freedom in 1776, and he was an educated slave. He was also a skilled organizer who was able to play the different foreign armies against each other. Had the Spanish fighting the British and both fighting the French and so forth. Now, by 1800, his forces controlled most of the island, and in 1801, he drafted a constitution granting equality and citizenship to all residents of Saint Domingue. Unfortunately, though, he was arrested by French forces sent by Napoleon in 1802, and he died in a French prison in 1803. Nevertheless, his efforts did lead to the Republic of Haiti. Yellow fever really took a toll on the French troops, started killing a lot of them, and Louverture's successors, the generals that took over after he was arrested, they defeated the remaining French forces there. And in 1804, they proclaimed the establishment of Haiti, which was the second independent republic in the Western Hemisphere after the United States. Now, other colonies followed this example with later Latin American independence movements. Now, like in Haiti, Latin America had a society based on race. right? You had your Peninsulares, who were directly from Spain and Portugal, right? We're talking about Iberian Peninsula colonies, sorry, ruled by the two countries on the Iberian Peninsula, Spain and Portugal. You had your Creoles, who were their descendants. Then you had your mixed, your mestizos and mulattoes, and then at the very bottom you had African slaves and Native Americans. Now, though Peninsulares were still technically on top, Creoles were becoming much more numerous. They also were feeling less and less attachment to the land of their great-grandparents and ancestors and so forth. They felt that, the land that they were living in, be it Colombia or Mexico or whatever, that was their land, right? They didn't have much connection to Spain and Portugal after so many generations. And by 1800, the Peninsulari population was only about 30,000, but the Creoles numbered about 3.5 million. And like the British colonists in North America, Creoles resented not having more say in their land. And also like the American colonists, they really didn't want to overhaul society. They just wanted to replace the Peninsulares and have political independence from Spain and Portugal. Now, they saw an opportunity for this when Napoleon went in and deposed the old monarchies of Spain and Portugal. This led to an array of revolutions between 1810 and 1829 in every Spanish colony in the Americas except for Cuba and Puerto Rico. Now, first, let's start with Mexican independence. Now, this movement really started in 1810 when a priest, Father Miguel Hidalgo, led a peasant uprising of indigenous and mestizo populations. Now, although he was executed by conservative Creoles because his views were just looked at as way too, extreme regarding social class, he became a symbol of Mexican independence and inspired later rebellions. Independence from Spain eventually came in 1821. All this was followed by a long period of instability. The most prominent revolutionary figure in South America was Simón Bolívar. Now, Bolívar was a Creole from what today is Caracas in Venezuela, and he was inspired by Enlightenment principles and also the example of George Washington. George Washington was somewhat of a personal hero of his. He led a local rebellion against Spain in 1811. And after off and on, fighting and being in exile and so forth, he was able to form a coalition. And by 1825, he and his coalition had driven Spain from Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Chile, and Argentina. Now, his dream was to unite all of the former Spanish colonies of South America into a single confederation like the United States. They tried this briefly in the 1820s with Gran Colombia. Let me move myself here. And you can see how it incorporated countries today such as Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, and so forth. But infighting led to its collapse. And in 1830, Bolivar left South America in disillusionment. And he said that, you people are never going to be able to figure this out. And he just left in disgust. Independence came to the Portuguese colonies around the same time when Brazil gained its independence, but it came about in a very different manner. When Napoleon invaded Portugal, the royal court fled to Brazil and established a government in exile. And when the king returned to Portugal after Napoleon's defeat, he left his son Pedro in charge of Brazil. And much to the king's surprise, his son decided to agree to Creole demands for independence, and he was declared Emperor Pedro of Brazil. So Brazil became the only former colony to become a monarchy and not some form of republic. All right, so that was a relatively quick one. Just talk about some of the, kind of next generation ones. But also, just to look at the map, you see the differences here from 1800 to 1830. In 1800, you can see how pretty much all of Central and South America was still under European control. And by 30 years later, almost all of South America, Mexico has gained its independence. You only have a couple of Caribbean countries that are still under Spanish control and a couple of random ones here in northern part of South America. Right, so some very, very significant changes in a relatively short amount of time. Okay, so for the next video, we're going to be talking about kind of more ideological views, moving away from the actual physical revolutions.